Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk. Today's topic is about data archival and long-term data retention in Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. My name is Rob, and I will be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this session through MS Teams Town Hall. This session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. When you join this event, your name and email address may be viewable by session organizers. By joining, you're agreeing to this experience. If you do not consent to be a part of a recorded session, please disconnect your line. The recording will be made available in the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page in the upcoming weeks. If you have questions for presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. If you wish your name not to be visible to organizers or session participants, please post your questions anonymously. Our presenters will be responding to your questions throughout the session and in live segment at the end of the presentation. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, along with me, we have Pravesh and Tommy. Let's head over to the agenda. In today's session, we will talk through the following topics. We start by identifying common business challenges around managing your business data and set the stage for how archival and long-term data retention can help you to address the challenges. From there, Pravesh will dive into the framework, scenarios, and roadmap. Tommy will pick up and walk through some demos and showcase key configuration experiences and usage. Next slide, please. Let's begin the conversation by covering some of the main reasons why data archival could be helpful to you and your organization. Business data generation happens daily and grows significantly throughout your usage of D365. This can cause performance issues. It can put pressure on your SQL database. It can also impact indexing operations and slow down query performance. Average to medium implementations in our market can easily exceed 1 terabyte per year, and in 5 to 10 years, it can grow significantly beyond that. Data growth is often proportional to the age of your business and also increases as your business grows. This imposes several challenges. As mentioned, it could put a lot of pressure on the SQL database. It could put pressure on your SQL tables, maybe needing newer indexes to increase performance where performance wasn't needed before. Next slide, please. We have some built-in options to help you manage your data. The most important is cleaning up unnecessary data and working tables. We have a large library and fantastic documentation on cleanup routines. Keeping a lot of these working tables trimmed and healthy will absolutely increase the performance and help you manage some of your transactional business processes. However, a lot of your non-working tables will need some better long-term data retention. And for that, we've got our archival framework. With that, next slide, please. With our long-term data retention and archiving framework, it helps you address a lot of your transactionable and auditable records. It helps you manage your data volume by imposing data retention policies. It helps you improve system performance by moving data out of your key transactional tables and into an analytics workspace. It helps reduce your database storage cost as the D365 Finance and Operation database is using a premium SQL server, premium storage, optimized for transactional efficiency. It gives you much better data governance. It allows you to set your retention policies and determine how much of that information needs to be stored and where. And as mentioned before, keeping your transactional data sized optimally will help with regular database maintenance activities like index maintenance and table statistics. With that, I'm going to transition over to Pravesh, who's going to talk about the data archive framework.
Thanks, Rob. Before diving into the data archive architecture, it is important to understand core data model components. That includes live table, history tables, the BI entity and finance and operations, virtual entity, and managed data lake or one lake in Dataverse. Live tables. A live table represents active transactional business data in Dynamics 365 finance and operations. For example, for sales order archive scenario, tables such as sales table, sales line are considered as a live table. History table. Each live table has a corresponding history table for with the same data schema designed to store archive records in X database. This also enables data to be restored back to the live tables if rollback is required by business. Data Archive Workspace in Finance and Operations provide read-only inquiry forms for each archival scenario, enabling users to review archive data stored in history tables when it is required. It is important that history tables mirror the live table schema with all columns are included. If there is any mismatch over there, system will throw the error message at time of scheduling data archive job. History tables are lightweight from indexing presentation. Microsoft recommends limiting to 1 or 2 index at max to optimize storage gain from the archival process. They are also excluded from indexing through DAMs from the performance index creation process. So customers are strongly advised not to build any business reports directly on history tables. Instead, reporting should be built using data in the data lake. A BI entity in Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations is a simple read-only data model used for reporting and analytics purpose. It provides a simplified, query-friendly view of the business data and it's not used for transactions and update purpose. Each BI entity is based on single data source with one BI entity per table to improve the performance. It closely mirrors the source table schema and expose its column in structured format. BI entities are exposed in Dataverse as virtual entities, which is why it is must to be enabled for the data archival scenarios in the Dataverse. During the installation of data archive service, the required virtual entities are automatically enabled in Dataverse. However, if custom entities are created by the customers and the partner, it need to be enabled in Dataverse manually. Any schema change made in BI entity in FNO must reflected by refreshing those virtual entities in Dataverse. If there is a schema mismatch between live table, history table, BI entity, or virtual entity, the system will block scheduling the data archival jobs in the environment due to the data inconsistency. So as a result of the data archival, we don't want that our customers to lose any data. The Dataverse managed data lake is also called as one lake. So data is exposed in Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation through virtual entities and it's stored in the structured schema format corresponding to those virtual entities. Using Fabric shortcuts and Lakehouse, you can access, review, and leverage this data for reporting and analytics purpose. So as per this particular data illustrated over here, it is important that all columns present in the live table should exist in the history table in the BI entities. The architectural diagram of the data archive framework. So you can see the three major components finance and operations as a FNO environment, archive service. It's a separate compute. We call it as a add-in that need to be installed as a part of the installation of the data archive service from Power Platform Admin Center. Tommy will provide that more details during the demo. And controller of the entire data archival process reside in the Dataverse. So all the different steps when performed during the execution of the data archival, it will be triggered from the Dataverse environment. We have a managed data lake, which is a part of Dataverse. And the actual data is being stored in managed data lake in form of Parquet format. The AX database perspective, we have live table and the history tables. So data move from live table to history table. And when the data archival process run, it use the data entity in FNO using the CDS virtual entity adapter service. Those data will keep on syncing to the managed data lake. And we use Azure Synapse Link or the Athena pipeline to keep syncing those data from FNO to data lake. We call it as a Athena channel. So, using Fabric, whenever that as an end user you need to perform that any kind of the inquiry or to build the reports, so user can access the data through Power BI. User will use the data archive workspace in finance and operations to schedule a new archive job for the different scenarios. The data archival process will be executed by scenario, and each scenario will have set of predefined tables. We'll understand more during the next TechTalk session regarding how to deal with the customization in case of if you have a requirement to add any custom tables to existing archive scenario, or if you need to build a new data archive scenario for your own custom tables. But it is essential that you should have a UI that has been built, and as a part of the user interface that will provide as an end user to schedule the archive job, providing the criterias. Based on the user-defined criteria provided by user, system will allow to schedule the archive job, and then the archive service will trigger and will play a role of the orchestration in terms of execution of the different archive processes. It will keep on syncing the process between finance and operations and Dataverse. And if you require to perform the restore of the operations, that you will able to restore the data back to the live tables. Archive framework, the data flow. This is the high level, the overview of the how's the data flow with an example. So as I mentioned previously about the data model components, live table, history table, the BI entities or the virtual entities in the data lake. So let's take the example of that I have a live table with 1000 records. So at the initial stage, as a part of the initial process, those 1000 live records will sync to the data lake or managed data lake. I have highlighted over here is a MDL called the managed data lake, that all 1000 records will sync to the managed data lake. And at that stage, we have a 0 record in the history table. Now, let's take an example that I need to archive 400 records. So as an execution of the data archival job, I was able to archive 400 records. So those 400 records are subtracted or deleted from the live table. So after execution of the 400 records archived, the live table will contain 600 records. The 400 records are moved to the history tables. In the managed data lake, you will have a 1000 records. But out of those 1000 records, 600 records will have a status called live, and the 400 records will have status archived. So we are not deleting any data from the managed data lake. In that way, we use managed data lake for long-term retention. The purpose. As a part of your data retention policy as a customer, if you don't need the data in the history table, and if you want to gain the storage further from the history tables, in this case, you can run purge history functionality that will allow you to purge the data from the history table And at that stage, you will have a 600 records in the live status. Managed data lake will still have a 1000 records with 600 live status and 400 archive status. And history table will become 0 records because of we use the purge history functionality to purge those records. And this data stored in this managed data lake will be available for your BPA if you are using business performance analytics for your analytics requirement, or if you have built, if you are using Fabric to build your reporting and analytics requirement. So those live in the archive records will available in for your reporting. So from reporting perspective, if you are using Fabric or in the data lake, you don't need to do any change in your reporting. You will get an additional column with the status update called live or the archive, and that will help you to segregate live in the archive records. But there is no impact on your reporting. When we move to the next slide, here is the illustration of the actual data flow, that how's the data archival process work. The table over here that shows the sequence of the steps performed during the execution of individual data archival job. It starts with step 0. So step 0 is the initial sync process. It has been performed once when you schedule a data archive job very first time for the specific archive scenario. At that stage, it synchronizes all records from corresponding live tables belong to the data archive scenario, and it takes them to the data lake before proceed with the data archival job or any particular steps that has been performed as a part of the data archival. And that is that now you can correlate with the example of the 1000 records. Those 1000 records from the live table get synced to the data lake. An actual data archival process will start with the sequence 1 in this diagram or the table that is called the marking. The marking updates the live record with based on the criteria that is provided by the user. And there is a column in all the tables enabled for the data archival process. You will have a column called sysdata code. By default, the value of that column 0 that represents that all records are in the live status. As a result of the marking, that it will mark that record for the archival, changing the status of 0 to 1. Given that example of, let's say that you have to archive 1 million record. We are not going to mark all 1 million records in a one shot. However, that entire the marking process will perform the marking in batch size of 5,000 records to the root table. So each data archive scenario will have a root table, and then you will have a child table based on the table relation that has been defined in the data archive framework. So those 5,000 records will be updated to the root table, and the underlying tables will, the transaction lines will get updated for those 5,000 records. In that particular the process, that entire the marking process will be executed, and it makes sure that data archival process run in the background with a kind of the lightweight, the batch operations. And these are not the batch, when I say the batch operations, we are not using the batch framework. We are using the process automation framework, using the data archive service. Those operations will be performed behind the scene at the SQL level. After completion, immediately after that you update those records for the marking, we have a delta sync process. It is a continuous incremental data sync process to syncing for the syncing of to any change been performed in the in AX database to the managed data lake using Athena pipeline or using Synapse link. So after completion of the reconciliation, so the delta sync will be responsible for the example that of the 1 million record that I have given, that we will make sure that all 1 million records are synced to the data lake before we run the move to history process. So we have an additional step that is called the reconciliation at the sequence 3. So the reconciliation is a recurring job in Dataverse. It is responsible for reconciling and make sure that all the records marked for archival in AX database has been reached successfully to the data lake before we trigger move to history functionality. As a result of the move to history, we move the data from live table to the history table. So there are the people who have a misunderstanding in terms of that when we run the data archival, we move the data immediately to the history table. That is wrong. The move to history process is the last step of the data archival process, and after successful completion of the move to history, that will be the end of data archival job. And that way that all the live records will move to the history table based on the criteria that has been provided by user. And as I mentioned previously, that once the data move to the history table, read-only forms are being provided that will allow you to read the data or perform the inquiries using the data archive workspace in finance and operations. Any point of time that business required that restore the data back to the live tables, they can use the restore functionality available on data archive workspace, and by selection of that individual data archive job, you will be able to restore the data back to the live tables. And any point of time that if you feel that you don't need the data in the history table, you can use the parse history to parse those records from the history tables. Once the records are parsed, you will not able to restore the data back into the live tables. And the data, as you see the data in the diagram, the data, it's the unidirectional flow from FNO to the data lake, so that we just keep on pushing the data to the data lake. You can't get the data back from managed data lake to the live tables. The history tables are the only way to restore the data back to live table. That is why it is very important for the customers to understand the use of the purge history functionality. And once the data has been archived, that will be available for BPA. Tommy, just move to the next. So now we are not restricting that the managed data lake for the data archival purpose. If you are using Synapse link or your own data lake, we call it as a BYOL, bring your own data lake or customer managed data lake, the archival is also been extended to the customer managed data lake. So there is no impact on if you are using Synapse or bring your own data lake, that the LTR has been also been supported for the managed data lake. And as a execution of the data archival job, when we delete the data to the data from the live tables, we do not delete the data from the data lake. That is the reason where you see the red arrow that is been suppressed within the AX database itself. And we have a column called sysdatastate code that can be used that if you need to segregate the data in terms of the live in the archive records. And the similar representation in the managed data lake, you will have a column in the BI entity, the column called MSFT underscore datastate. And it represents the same value. 0 means live records and 1 means the archive records. Once you have a data in your data lake, you can use Fabric, the shortcuts. That way you can use the lakehouse and SQL Analytics endpoints to perform that inquiry, or you can use the data in your Power BI. And if you want to use the advanced warehouse management, the processes, you can take the data to your own warehouse where you can create a different the models, and you can have you can build your reporting and your analytics requirement. So just we want to call out when you use the data archival using data lake in terms of the customer managed data lake or Microsoft managed data lake, there is no impact on your reporting. As we do not delete the data from the any form of the data lake that include bring your own lake as well as customer managed Microsoft managed data lake. Move to the next slide. Here is the case study in terms of the storage perspective. So this is the example that we did the close review with the customer, where at the starting point they have somewhere around 1.7 terabyte of the data from the live table that belong to sales order archive scenario. As a result of the data archival execution, we were able to bring that down to 276 gigabytes. That means it was a storage gain of 1.4 terabyte. However, when we reduce that 1.4 terabyte, the data from the live tables, we move those records to the history table, and that 1.4 has been represented as a 318 gigabytes in the history table. So that was the 318 GB of the storage that we have increased in form of history tables. So from the FNO, the database consumption perspective, we need to offset the 318. That means that 1.1 terabyte of the storage gain from finance and operations. And when we move the data to the managed data lake, to the Microsoft charge to the customers in terms of that we increase the in your capacity report, you can see the archive records has been represented as a retained that entity. So, for example, the sales line, the BI entity will represent as a MSERP underscore sales line BI entity hyphen retained. I just want to call out that the hyphen retain or the hyphen analytics is just a storage representation. The actual data has been stored in the form of the virtual entity, the name. So that way you can perform the inquiry taking the name of the virtual entity in terms of MSERP underscore sales line BI entity, where you'll be able to get live in the archive record from managed data lake using Fabric shortcuts. So as a result of the data archival, when we reduce that 1.1 terabyte from the X database, it has increased the storage of 187 gigabytes in your Dataverse consumption. That way, if I offset that 187 gigabytes, that my total saving with this customer was 985 gigabytes. Now that customer has a choice. If customer doesn't want the data in the history table, they can use purge history functionality and they can get rid of 318 gigabytes of the data from history table. And that way, the overall storage gain from the live table reduction and increase of the Dataverse, the consumption will become 1,304 gigabytes. That is a good saving in terms of if you compare the ratio from 1.4 terabyte to 187 gigabytes in Dataverse consumption. This is the example of the template that Microsoft Fast Track has created for that our customers and the partner to do that kind of the analysis by their own. The article has been published on Viva Engage community. We will strongly recommend you to refer to this and go through the content of that article that will explain you that how you can perform the similar kind of the analysis by your own. At the very starting point that you need the table at the starting point, that is the static data. And then you need to download your Power Platform Admin Center, the capacity reports for FNO, as well as the Dataverse. That way you get the table size for the from the FNO database and the Dataverse tables. You can put the data in the template that has been published on the Viva Engage community, and the in the dashboard slide that we automatically refresh the data in terms of your storage reduction. Move next to this slide, please. InventRAN's archival scenario. So out of that, all other data archive scenarios, it follows the live table, history table, and the BI entity route. InventRAN's is a special case because we don't want to disturb the inventory transaction, because of that inventory transaction is being used for the different purposes. In terms of that, you need to perform the on-hand inquiries for your on-hand inventories based on the different statuses. So we have introduced a process called inventory transaction consolidation. As a result of the inventory transaction consolidation process, we move the data from the live table, that is the InventRAN's table, to InventRAN's archive, which is called the staging table. And the data is being stored in the InventRAN's archive table. And at the same point, we will create a consolidated entries back into the live table. The consolidated entries that will be performed based on the combination of item ID and the invent dim ID. So if you have a multiple transactions, related to the same invent dim ID for that particular item, the scope of the consolidation will be increased a lot. If you are using serialized serial track items or the batch track items, so you will have the multiple records related to those particular transactions, and in that case, there will be the less opportunity to consolidate. So it depends on the customer what kind of the tracking dimension is being used in your business process. This inventory consolidation process will determine the aggregation scope, and those based on that aggregation scope, the storage reduction from the invent trans, the table will be determined. And what do you see in this yellow box is a batch operation. So you need to schedule the batch job called inventory transaction consolidation, and the result of the inventory transaction consolidation will become an input for the data archival process as a part of that overall inventory transaction archival scenario. And that InventTrans archive will be treated as a live table compared to the previous screen that we have discussed. And that will be used to sync the data from InventTrans archive to InventTrans archive BI entity in the managed data lake. And then the process will follow the similar in terms of the move to history, and if you require that you can restore the data back to the live tables. If you want to build analytics in combination of the InventTrans and the archive records, if you just move to the next, you will able to you can enable the InventTrans sync to the InventTrans table. And here that I have given that example of bring your own lake or the BYOL scenario perspective. So you will have a live table goes to the InventTrans table. But as soon as you run the data inventory transaction consolidation job, which is a batch job, so delete action performed on the InventTrans the table that will delete the data from the InventTrans table in the data lake, and that data move to the InventTrans archive table. So that you need to sync that InventTrans archive over there to the data lake, and the union of InventTrans plus InventTrans archive minus consolidated records, because of otherwise it will create a duplicate entries for your reporting. So it is important that you need to exclude those consolidated entries. When the new consolidated entries will created in the InventTrans table, it will have a different type. So based on that, you will able to easily identify those consolidated records, and you can exclude those consolidated records. And that way, you will have a complete list of InventTrans table in your data lake, and you can continue using the data for your reporting. If you just move next, that will illustrate the diagram over here that represent that overall the analytics story. So that way, we want to make sure that when you use the data archival, if you have built your analytics using the data lake in terms of BYOL or Microsoft Managed Data Lake using Fabric, there is no impact on your reporting. With that, I'm handing over to Tommy for archive scenarios roadmap. Tommy, over to you.
Thank you, Pramesh. So I'm going to talk about what are the available scenarios and what is on our roadmap. And I'm also going to do a demo of how this works. So what you see in front of you right now is a list of what are the scenarios that are general available. And you can also see that we have some scenarios that are in a private preview. And then here you can reach out to us who are presenting or product group. You can also reach out on the Viva community to check if you can be part of the private preview or not. We're also planning to add more archive scenarios going forward, and that would obviously open for even more archiving opportunities to our customers. And we know that they want to start archiving more and more of their data, but there might not be an available scenario for them just yet. I would want to call out that in this roadmap, we have a custom archive type, and this has just recently been released, and we're planning to discuss this and how this works in more detail in an upcoming Tech Talk. Obviously, the custom archive scenario, it will open up for more possibilities where the customers or the partners or ISVs, they can build their own custom archiving scenarios for their own tables. Now, this is different from what we already have, where you can extend with your own the standard tables, or you can extend with new related tables to existing scenarios. Also want to call out that we are in private preview of being able to run data archive jobs in parallel, meaning that you can run multiple data archive jobs at the same time, which is not possible today in standard. This is in private preview, and reach out to us if you have any questions about that. This is just to give you an idea about how these archive scenarios obviously span across multiple tables, similar to what Pravesh has already explained. And you can see, for example, here that the general ledger archive is covering a lot of different tables. Some of them are specific to localized functionality. You can also see here that there's like you said, it's an equivalent history table for the live table. And then you can see that the live tables and the history tables also have an equivalent BI entity, just like Pravesh has explained. And also that you can imagine that these are going to have the same structure and schema and field names. There's also these entities that are in FNO that represents the structure of these tables. And then finally, there are the virtual entities in Dataverse. So just looking at this table, you can see that there are different tables, they have different names and naming conventions. And if you look into the Dataverse solution, you will also find them there represented with the MSARP namespace prefix, similar to what we've seen in previous slides. You can also see that, for example, with the sales order archive on this screen, that it's not just the sales order tables, but it also includes the call center orders and retail tables. Also notice that for each of these scenarios, there is a root table. So every single one of them are going to have a root table. And then we have the related tables to that root tables. And then that could be a tree or a hierarchy of multiple tables for each scenario. Right now, there are some limitations that you should be aware of. There is a limit up to 1 billion records per table. Now we can enable exceptions to this. So if necessary, just reach out to us if you have any specific needs where you have more than 1 billion records and you want to validate one of the archiving scenarios. Each of these various scenarios obviously have their own discrete constraints and prerequisites. So there are slight differences between them, and that's good to know. Like, for example, the general ledger and the tax transaction scenarios, they require the archiving to be happening chronologically. And it also requires the fiscal years to have been properly closed off. The inventory transaction and journals, they also require closure, and we will try to prevent you from archiving things that will cause problems for you. So, for example, you're not going to be able to archive anything that is within the last 12 months, so that you're not doing any very aggressive archiving that basically could break you. For sales orders, for example, you can pick any period of time, but we only archive orders that have been invoiced. So if there are any open orders, they are not going to be archived. And retail transactions, commerce transactions, it will also let you pick periods freely. But at the same time, they cannot remain in an open state. So this is going to be true for every single archiving scenario, that we will put into the framework logical constraints and restrictions to prevent you from doing harm onto yourself. So let's do a few demonstrations on how to set up and use the long-term retention. So I will here show you how to install the Data Archive app from the Power Platform Admin Center. Let's see. In PPAC and on the environment page, you first have to verify that it's a managed environment. So you should see the status yes on managed environments. Then you can go to Dynamics 365 apps and ensure you have the prerequisites installed. So you need to make sure you have the platform, the Finance Operations Platform tools and the Finance and Operations Virtual Entity prerequisites installed. So here I'm checking that they have both of them installed, and then from the toolbar you can then hit install, and then you'll find a list of all of the various apps that are available. You want to find the one that's named Archive with Long-Term Retention, and then select that and install that. You have to agree to the terms and hit install, and then there will be a banner that will call out that the installation has started. And this installation, it may take a few minutes to complete, and you can obviously hit the refresh button to reload the view, and it will say installing, and at some point it will say that it has been successfully installed. And here I will show you how to enable the feature in FNO itself. So you want to go to Feature Management Form. You can search for the form itself. And then when you're on the feature management form, you can just go to the all tabs, and then you can search for the feature, let's say using the term archive. And here I'm just selecting the feature and simply just enable now, and off you go. So that's how easy it is to enable the feature. So now let's try to access the form itself. So this is after you've enabled the feature, of course. You should find it on the dashboard, but you can also find it by searching for Archive with Dataverse Long-Term Retention. And on the form, you'll see the various scenarios that are available in the system. I have general ledger, the inventory, transactions, sales orders, and tax transactions. If you have a scenario that's in preview, it will also show here. I hit the refresh here on the general ledger scenario, and that is to load up all of the periods that are available for the archiving. And that's true for the general ledger archiving scenario, but it's not the same case for the other scenarios. Okay, so now I will run the general ledger scenario as an example. So I'm looking at the fiscal calendar named fiscal in our Contoso demo. And as you can see, the 2015 periods are in the not ready state. Now I went into general ledger module and I closed off these periods, and I'm refreshing now. So you can see that now they are ready after I put all of those periods on hold. I'm going to run a new job here. I'm going to give it a name, USMF 2015, and then I'm going to run just now a single instance instead of a schedule run. So I'm providing the parameters for the legal entity. I'm providing the time for when I want to run this. And here I'm reviewing the settings that they all look exactly like I expect them to be. And now when I hit finish, this is going to enqueue the job, and you can see the line after I've enqueued it. You will see the line goes back to not ready. And then you can scroll all the way to the right side of the grid to see how the job is progressing. Right now it's just waiting to start and kick off. But eventually it will start, and then it will begin the process of the initial sync and then reconciliation and the move to history. And you can also get a slide in of the ongoing status by clicking on that status link in the grid. Yeah, and here you can see it has completed. I can click on the status and I can see the timeline. I can see that it ran the initialization steps. It did some verification and reconciliation. It also did the move to history process. And then it goes from the leaf tables first and then move over to the let's say the parent and all the way up to the root level. And finally, it will process and complete the root table, which in this case would be the general ledger journal entry table. Now, this job in this example covered around 27,000 records, and it did that within a few hours in my Contoso demo data. After you completed an archival job, you can also access the history. So here I'll show you how that works. You can go to history by clicking on the archive job and then click on the view history data. And this gives you a form where you can see the transaction overview. And you can go into a specific transaction by clicking the general tab for that selected row. And here you can see more details of that data set, let's say. And that could be used by someone who just wants to do a quick check and an audit to validate discrete transactions from what has been archived. Now, we're going to complete the demonstration here with a simple example on how you can easily and simply get access to the data through Fabric using a Fabric data agent. Now, what you're looking at right now is a plan to bring the data off of the finance and operations and into the lakehouse in Fabric. And as you may recall, the actual archive data is stored inside of Dataverse in a managed lake. And we often refer to that as the one lake. The data lake is inside of Dataverse and it will contain the data from finance operations, but you can also bring in other tables from your customer engagement apps. In Fabric, you can then create yourself a workspace, and in that workspace, you can create a lakehouse, and then you can bring in the relevant tables for your lakehouse. That would be shortcuts, so it's not like a copy of the tables. It's rather shortcuts to the data itself. And the data in this lakehouse could then be used as a source for what's called a Fabric data agent. Now, data agent in its simplest form is something you can create in Fabric to allow you to look into your data using natural language, so using AI essentially. And in this example, I will show you how you can access sales orders that I've archived in my Contoso demo data. Now, on top of that, you can also expose this data agent into Copilot Studio as a child agent. And that allows for even more advanced scenarios. And I think with this simple example, you could, of course, make this way more complicated and advanced, depending on how far you want to take it. But yeah, you could do more richer extractions and richer transformations for any downstream consumption beyond the Power BI example that Pravesh has shared. So I'm going to run this now. From within inside the Maker portal, and on the tables, I can go to Analyze and to link to Microsoft Fabric. In this case, I've already done the linking, so it will open up the Fabric workspace that gets set up when you do the linking itself. And from here, you can see that I can find all of the tables that have already been added to my lake. The ones that are prefixed with MSERP will be typically the ones where you'll find the archive tables and other artifacts as well. I can also go to Azure Synapse link, and from here I can find the profile, the link to Fabric profile here, and I can also go and have a look at the tables and define or add additional tables here if I wanted to. I can also go to the Fabric workspace by clicking on the view in Microsoft Fabric, and it will navigate me back to the Fabric workspace. The next thing I did is I went ahead and I created myself my own lakehouse, named it Sales Order Archive. And in this lakehouse, I picked only the tables that I were interested in. So these are tables coming out of the sales orders. And you can see that I have my sales table BI entity here. In the lakehouse, I can jump over to the SQL analytical endpoint. And from here, I can go and create views. So I created myself a view that would pull data from the BI entity table in the lake. And here you can see the view. I'm pulling out only a few set of columns, select columns. I'm also filtering on MSFT data states equals to 1. And I have one for the header and one for the line. And if you see, if I select data from the header view, I'm getting all of the records that I'm interested in. So you can see that I'm pulling out the data for some of the columns here, and this is the data that I'm planning to have for my agent. So let's go and have a look at the agent. I put that in the same location as my lakehouse for convenience. Created a sales order archive data agent, and the first thing it does, it's going to ask for data I want to use for my agent. So I pointed it towards my 2 different views, and from there, you can see here are the columns I have in my views. And from there, I was basically able to start working on my data, but I did provide some specific agent instructions to give it even some more context about the data. And frankly, I used AI to help me build this out. I also gave it some instructions about what the various 2 data sources look like and what to expect. I also gave it some example questions and what SQL queries could be used for those questions. So now I'm going to test the agent here. So I'm going to just collapse everything and run a simple example where I wanted to show me the number of orders that I've archived, show me it over the years and across the various legal entities. And in my demo environment, I've run archiving for just USMF, and I've only run archiving for a couple of years. And you can see that it came back with a result. And here I can also see how it arrived to that result. So it took my question and turned it into a query, ran the query against the lake, and came back with this result. So I'm just now going to publish this agent, and after publishing it, I will be able to consume it from either M365 directly, or I can also consume it anywhere else, because it actually exposes a MCP endpoint that I could connect to. And I will also now show you how you can connect to Copilot Studio. I'm in Copilot Studio, and I've created myself a sales order archive agent. So I picked a blank template. I gave it a description. I chose GPT-5 chat as model, gave it some instructions, and the only other thing I added was the child agent as a Fabric data agent, sales order archive here. And you can see it's a Fabric data agent connecting through me, and it has the agent ID and the workspace ID. And you see under tools, it exposes the MCP endpoint. And this is how I did it. I went into agents, I add a child agent, and then I can go connect to an external agent and pick Fabric. And I'm here also connecting through as myself, searching for that data agent. I can select it here, and I will go ahead and give it a description before I hit the add and configure. Like this, and then it's there. Now, I don't need another one of these, so I'm going to go ahead and just go remove it. But now at least you know how to add it. You see how easy it is. So this should just take a second to delete it. Now, next thing I want to do is I want to test this. So let's hit the test, get the test chat slide in here, and let's try something. Let's say how many sales orders are archived across legal entities in total. And let's see what it comes back with. And I need to authenticate for the first time when I'm doing this testing. Again, it's using me to authenticate here. Let's expand the test pane so I can see what it actually does. So I can see that it invokes the data agent MCP, passes over the question as a string, and comes back with a string. And also the chat, you see there are a total of 7 and 8 archive sales orders across the legal entities. So with this, I'm happy. I can go ahead and just publish this agent the way it is. And now I could go and consume it through other channels like Teams, for example, or M365 again. And with that, you can see how, just as an example, how easy it is to take the data you have in the archive, make it available as in a custom lakehouse, and then put a data agent on top of it. And then you can start querying the archive. So just to quickly wrap up what we've demonstrated so far, it is what you need to set it up and how to run the setup, how to activate the feature. Also give you a quick demo on running the archiving itself and how you can monitor the progress. And also how you can access the data from the history tables using the history inquiry form. And then finally, a quick demonstration on how to access the data in OneLake and through Fabric, and in this case, using a data agent. So finally, here are some references. We do have public documentation that demonstrates and documents the various data archiving scenarios and the feature, and also how to set up and also how to customize. And we have also there the full table that shows you the various tables that are included in the different scenarios. We also have a Viva community form or a Viva community that you can access. So notice the aka.ms/finups Viva sign up. If you go there, you can sign up for various Viva communities, including the data archive with Dataverse long-term retention. Also take a note of the inventory archiving and how that differentiates from the other ones, where you have the consolidation part that Pravesh was explaining. And then obviously we have an FAQ. The next I want to call out finally here before we end is that we have another episode of Tech Talk coming on May 13th. And in this one, we will be talking in more depth about how you can extend. As you know, we've had for a while the ability for you to archive your custom fields on the tables, and obviously the opportunity to add existing tables that are referenced to standard tables as part of archiving scenarios. But what's coming new is also now the ability to build completely build your own new archiving scenarios. So we really look forward to show you that on the next Tech Talk, again on the May 13th. So with that, I'm gonna quickly head over to Q&A, and I'm gonna ask Rob or Pravesh if there's any questions that we'd like to call out specifically.
I'll start. So we have a question, and I'll read it and I'll let you answer. Dataverse is unsustainably expensive. Does all of this work on the archival framework work also with customer managed data lake, or is this specific to Dataverse?
Yeah, so our archiving feature is contained towards the Dataverse managed lake. So that's what we offer out of the box. And we are putting in the necessary guardrails to ensure and protect that we have the data secured in the managed lake in Dataverse as part of the archiving feature itself. Pravesh demonstrated that or showed that you can also bring in your own lake, but now the data will travel outside of let's say the archiving feature. So we can no longer guarantee that. So we can simply not control your own lake the same way we can control the managed lake. So for the purpose of ensuring that you can properly archive from beginning to start, it will involve the managed lake. Now we're previewing also the capability of purging the managed lake for data if that's really what you want to do. But then obviously you are responsible for making sure you put the data somewhere else. I don't know, some other lake or some other warehouse. Having said that, I will also call out that the compression rate for the data from the live and history tables to the lake is significant, obviously depending on the data composition.
So we're running out of time, but we'll do one more question. And this one is about long-term data retention and a unified developer sandbox environment. The question is, when copying data to a unified developer sandbox environment, will there be an option to leave history tables behind and only copy the live tables as perhaps a halfway between a transaction-less copy and a full database copy?
Yeah, so when you use full database copy, you will be able to get everything, including the history tables. When you use the transaction-less copy, it goes by the table group. The property has been set as a part of the metadata. And at that time, those tables will get truncated. So it depends on the customer's choice when you perform the environment copy in the Power Platform Admin Center. Full copy or transaction-less.
This does sound like a good feature request that I encourage everyone to either put on the Ideas portal, or if it already exists, upload it on the Ideas portal.
Well, thank you for the questions, and thank you for being here and participating. Any final remarks?
I do want to remind everyone that the recording will be made available on the Dynamics TechTalk community site in upcoming weeks. Thank you for joining today. This concludes the event.
Thank you.
Thank you.